Welcome back. In episode 1, we covered both the modern Scandi and the Qd6 Scandinavian Defense, by far the most common at the top level. Next, we covered the A5 Scandi in episode 2, by far the most common at the intermediate level. We'll be covering everything that's not the Qd8 and the A5 Scandi, which is comprised of the Qd6 Scandinavian Defense and then several early mistakes. And you may be surprised to learn that people make these mistakes all the way up the rating ladder, even up into the 2000s. People are playing Qe6 check, Qe5 check, absolutely abysmal moves. Anyways, my point being, I think this is going to be the most important one for beginners, because I feel like a lot of low-level players will leave a ton of rating points on the ground here by playing these nonsense moves in the opening because they don't know what to do. And with a little study, we can learn how to refute them completely forever. As always, I'll go from most to least common, starting with Qe6 check. First, let me reset my filters. And Qe6 check, as you'll remember from our previous videos, we actually won our bishop on e2 anyways, so the move here is always going to be bishop e2. This move by black, by the way, is terrible for a million reasons. Obviously, they're blocking their e-pawn, they're blocking their light bishop. The fact that Stockfish isn't saying this is like +2 is more just a testament to how impressive Stockfish is. We're already winning, make no mistake here. I'll follow a few of the most common moves to show you the setup we'll go for. It's the exact same idea as the d8 Scandi, except they can't pin our knight. We're going to develop our knight, push d4, castle short. Afterwards, we can bring our rook to the e-file with tempo. Our position is completely crushing, let's move on. The next most common move will be queen e5 check. Now what in the world could we play here? Again, we're going for the exact same setup we always go for. Here, since the queen isn't blocking this bishop anymore, most people will start with the pin, as we discussed in our queen d8 episode. And while blocking the pawn and the bishop was the weakness of the Qe6 check, the true weakness of the queen e5 check is in just how vulnerable this queen is, because we have t4 with tempo. Here, most people will check and allow us to develop with tempo, and should they retreat back to d6, we can develop our bishop with tempo as well. Look at their minor pieces, look at ours, let's move on. Alright, we're on to the juicy part of the episode, which is the Qd6 Scandi, which is actually very, very formidable. It's played at the Grandmaster level, and I've played it some myself. It's very flexible, it's very easy to play, and it's very dangerous. And I'm about to show you a very, very consistent way to find an advantage against it. So they play queen d6. We're always going to start with d4. The first thing I want to point out are the early mistakes here. First of all, if they go knight c6, even better than d5 is swinging our knight out to b5. This forces their queen back to a light square and just dooms their bishop to be a tall pawn. As you can see in the database, most people just decide to hang the game. Anyways, if they play e5, that's also a huge mistake. The move here is queen e2, obviously pinning the pawn to the king. And then we can just capture the next turn after they play knight c6. With the early mistakes out of the way, let's assume they find the correct move and find either knight f6, c6, or g6. As I said before, the Qd6 Scandi is very flexible and easy to play. You'll pretty much always play these moves as black. And I'll show you the moves we're always going to play in response as white in order to crush them. First, we want to get our bishop out. Afterwards, we're going to go knight e2, and then develop our bishop with tempo. And that's the way we're going to find a consistent advantage against the Qd6 Scandinavian Defense. Before we can enact our plan and gain a tempo, we need to get our light bishop out. I usually like going to d3. We'll see how it plays out with the most common moves. Here, I would play bishop d3. The most common move is bishop g4. And if you'll remember from episode 1, we'll want to play f3 here whenever they play bishop g4, because we still have the option to castle long. But assuming they don't, assuming they just play something more innocuous like knight c6, less of a mistake, something less accurate, here we can see how bishop f4 plays out. If we just quickly look at our development, they haven't developed either of their bishops, and developing their dark bishop's going to take at least one turn, because they have a pawn to move still. Meanwhile, both of our bishops and knights are developed, so that's all of our minor pieces. And while their queen's developed, and our queen isn't, I would argue we have a much better attacking position, and they're about to lose a tempo with their queen, and most people go back to d8. If they play e5 there, you can just take with the pawn. From here I'll castle, and this is a setup we'll be playing for every single time. You will find a lot of success with this setup. Let's go through another case study. Back to our starting position, as always, we'll start with d4. And this time we'll look at what happens if they prioritize their Caro-Kann structure by starting with c6. And here's where my system starts to get a little bit spicy. The move here I would still play, and notice you don't see it anywhere here, is bishop d3. Can't they just capture our pawn? Well, yes, but we can develop with tempo. Trust me, this is a very, very fun, very comfortable position to play, and it'll usually end in a checkmate in the middle game. So just remember, don't worry about hanging the pawn, we can always develop with tempo. Not that way though. Alright, so bishop d3. The people that know better than to capture the pawn will play knight f6, and here again our plan should be very obvious, which is why this system is so dang good. We're going to go bishop f4 with tempo, and that's how we're going to get our advantage. If they go bishop g4, obviously we'll push f3, as you can see, and it's the exact same idea. From the queen d6 line, we're going to pawn storm on the king side and castle queen side, otherwise we'll castle short. In my opinion, this system with knight e2 and bishop f4, after untrapping your bishop, is by far the best way to play the queen d6 Scandinavian. I hated facing this system when I played this as black, and my win rate from this position, as yours will be too, is absolutely ludicrous. Hopefully, if you were having some trouble with the Scandinavian defense, I was able to help you out with this series. As I said before, this has always been an opening that I've just had really no problem with, and hopefully when you run into the Scandinavian defense over the board, you'll remember to not be rude and laugh in the face of your opponent, like Bobby Fischer did, but instead to beat them gracefully.
Yes, Qd6 explain will help you train.